Good morning, everyone. My name is Alberto Sarleo. I'm a professor of material science and engineering at Stanford University. And it is my great honor today to chair this symposium to award the Franco Strazzabosco Award in Engineering of ISSNAF. A few words about ISSNAF. ISSNAF is the Italian Scientists and Scholars in North America Foundation. It is a not-for-profit organization whose mission is to connect, empower, and celebrate the intellectual Italian diaspora in North America. We have more than 3,000 scholars and researchers and technologists as part of our network. We promote networking, cultural, scientific, academic, and technological cooperation within our community and with public and private organizations in North America and Italy. And today we're here for one of the key aspects of our mission, which is to celebrate, and it's the awards. We have a range of awards, and in particular, we have the Young Investigator Awards. There's a number of them. We have the Embassy of Italy Award with a topic that rotates year after year. This is sponsored by the Embassy of Italy in the US. We have the Franco Strazzabosco Award in engineering, which is the one we will be awarding today. We have the Bruno Tuschek Award for research in elementary and particle physics. We have the Mario Gerlo Award for research in computer science, and the Paola Campezo Award for research in hematological malignancies, and the RNB4 Culture Award for Innovation and Study of Italian Culture. So today we're here for the Strazzabosco Award. A few words about this award. This award was established in 2013 by the Strazzabosco family in memory of Dottor Ingegnere Franco Strazzabosco. And this award is a tribute to the entrepreneurial courage of Italian engineers who strive to apply scientific discoveries to the public advantage. This year, the Franco Strazzabosco Award, which every year has been a general award for engineering, this year is focused on energy for a sustainable world. So having said these few words to introduce the award, let me first introduce the jury of the award. So I am the chair of the award and I'm chairing the jury. We also have Professor Simone D'Amico, professor in aeronautical and aerospace engineering at Stanford University, and Dr. Emanuele Pecora, who's a program manager at the Department of Energy. Before we get started, if you have questions from the attendees, please put your questions in the chat. There will be abundant time for questions from both the jury and the attendees after each presentation. Each presentation will last 15 minutes, and we have 3 of them. So please put your questions in the Q&A box, and then we will address the questions at the end of the presentation. So I guess it's time to get started with our 3 finalists. So the way this award works is we have 3 finalists who will give us 3 presentations. There'll be questions, and the jury will award the winner of this award. We will actually go. So our 3 finalists are Luigi Osmieri from Los Alamos National Lab, Francesca Parise at Cornell University, and Bartolomeo Stellato at Princeton University. And we will go in alphabetical order. So we'll start with Luigi Osmieri, who is currently a postdoc at Los Alamos National Lab, and he will tell us about catalysts and electrodes for affordable hydrogen generation and utilization. Luigi, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. I will try to share my screen. Can you see my screen?
No, we currently can't.
Oh, okay.
What about hold on. Okay, now we can, but it's
okay.
In editing mode. Okay, perfect. We see your no. This is now.
Okay, so
okay.
This
now we're good.
Full screen mode. Okay. Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. It's a great pleasure and honor to have been selected as one of the finalists for this award. I will try to present today my research work and try to start with the motivation of my research and explain why it is important, and then move forward with some of the technical accomplishments and the impact. So I would like to start by mentioning the global warming, which is a great issue for our planet, with a lot of bad effects that are every day more evident. And one of the ways that we have, the main way that we have to fight and mitigate the impact of global warming is actually try to reduce the emissions of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which are primarily due to the production of energy. So there's a need of decarbonize our energy production system. And recently, the United States Department of Energy has developed the so-called Hydrogen at Scale initiative with the goal of integrating hydrogen in the energy production system and in the economy, with the goal of helping decarbonization, and which can also have a great impact for the economic growth and the jobs creation. We can see from this plot how the electricity produced in the United States using renewable energy, renewable sources over the last decade has increased. However, the renewables are intermittent. Let's just think about the solar and the wind, and they do not necessarily match the electricity consumption peaks. So there is a need of storage this excess electricity produced by renewables. And one of the ways is to use the electricity to generate hydrogen via a low temperature water electrolysis. So in a water electrolyzer, we can split the water molecule into hydrogen and oxygen without any emission of greenhouse gases. The only byproducts is the oxygen and the hydrogen that after being generated can be stored and then used later on when we need to produce more electricity in a low temperature fuel cell. So the electrolyzers and fuel cells are electrochemical energy conversion devices that can operate at close to ambient conditions, so enabling the fast startup and shutdown of the systems. However, to operate with high efficiency, they need catalysts to enhance the reaction kinetics at the electrodes. Unfortunately, the best catalysts for all the electrochemical reactions involved in fuel cell, low temperature fuel cells and electrolyzers are the so-called platinum group metals. As we can see from this plot, they are the best, the ones that show the best activity. But unfortunately, they are very expensive materials. And as we can see in this plot, the variation of the price of all the PGMs over the last 20 years, we can see that they also undergo big fluctuations. So, for example, iridium nowadays is its price on the market is around $4,000 per ounce. So this high price has creates a drawback in the production of these fuel cells and water electrolysis systems that use these materials as catalysts, because even if when we increase the production volume, the overall cost goes down, the percent of this total cost due to the catalyst actually goes up. Another drawback of these materials is that they are mined in just a few locations in the world, and they are mostly concentrated in South Africa and Russia. So trying to replace these platinum group metals with catalysts made of more earth-abundant elements will help both in reducing the cost of fuel cells and water electrolyzers, but also in reducing the dependence on import from other countries. I would like to talk now about my work on the development of PGM-free catalysts for oxygen reduction reaction, with the goal of replacing platinum as the cathode catalyst in proton exchange membrane fuel cells. Talking about these materials, we have to mention that they are carbon-based materials doped with nitrogen and transition metals like iron that are derived from heat treatment of various precursors. But they are substantially different compared to the traditional platinum on carbon catalysts, primarily due to the different active sites that in platinum catalysts basically platinum nanoparticles dispersed on carbon support, while in these materials, the active site is an atomically dispersed transition metal atom coordinated with nitrogen in a carbon matrix. In addition to this, they are also substantially different in terms of morphology, interaction with ionomer, and in the catalyst layer structure in the electrode. So there is a need to better understand the electrode, the relationship between electrode structure and properties to try to improve their performance. The first work that I would like to mention is the study of the oxygen reduction reaction kinetics of an iron-nitrogen carbon catalyst applied on the cathode of an operating fuel cell. Here, we try to propose a modification of a previously established equation that puts in relation the availability of the active sites in function of the cathode potential. We propose the insertion of two experimentally measured parameters, the iron oxidation state that was measured by X-ray absorption and the redox potential measured by cyclic voltammetry. After inserting this modified equation expression of the availability of active sites on the overall kinetic equation, we validated the model by fitting different experimental data collected over a range of operating conditions like pressure, temperature, and cell potentials, obtaining a good fitting of the experimental data. Later on, this model was applied through a collaboration with a modeling group at Argonne National Lab in order to quantify improvements needed to meet certain performance targets that were set for fuel cells operating with this PGM-free catalyst. And in particular, we found out that improvements are needed both in the catalyst activity, but also in the electrode structure design to improve the proton conductivity and the oxygen mass transport. So talking about electrode engineering and electrode design, when we prepare an electrode, we basically mix the catalyst with an ionomer and disperse it in a solvent in order to create an ink that is then deposited on the electrode. We can play with different variables like the ionomer content, the ink solvent composition, or even the chemistry of the ionomer, and we obtain different performances which are not easy to explain, depending on also on the operating conditions. So I developed two methods to quantify the mass transport resistance in PGM-free electrodes based on limiting current. The first one was based on the hydrogen oxidation limiting current that does not consider the generation of water in the electrode. And then a second one was based on oxygen reduction reaction limiting current, which considers the water generation and can be more conveniently applied when this water generation is a more limiting factor for mass transport. Finally, I summarized the results of all the experimental tests done, changing different variables of the electrode fabrication to demonstrate that for getting the best performing electrode, we need to find a good compromise between minimizing the gas phase mass transport resistance and the proton resistance in the catalyst layer. This represents a systematic approach proposed for understanding the impact of electrode fabrication variables to improve performance and expand robust operation. Another important aspect is understanding the durability of these materials. They undergo degradation over time, and so far there has not been a universally adopted method for testing the durability of these materials. So I have tested the durability under several different operating conditions and found out that regardless of the operating condition, a good clear correlation was found between the degradation and the loss of the iron in the catalyst, and also the increasing the oxidation of the surface, which all go together with the decrease of in the cathode kinetics. So this work was used as the base for future development of standardized protocols that were then validated and disseminated, and they are now recommended by the United States Department of Energy as a testing protocol for assessing the durability of the PGM-free catalyst. And they were also published recently in Nature Catalysis. I would like to move forward by talking a little bit about my work related to PGM-free catalysts for oxygen evolution reactions, so with application to low-temperature water electrolyzers. Currently, the two main technologies for water electrolysis are liquid alkaline electrolyzers that can operate with PGM-free catalysts, but have the drawback of operating with highly concentrated alkaline solutions and at low current densities. The other competing technology is the proton exchange membrane electrolyzer, which operates with pure water and at high current densities, but has the drawback of only working with the PGM catalyst. Recently, the development of more performing anion exchange membranes can enable the operation of a new technology, the anion exchange membrane water electrolysis, that can combine the advantage of the previous two, so operating with pure water and also with PGM-free catalyst. But since it is a good technology, it requires understanding of the catalyst design, electrode fabrication, and durability. The first challenge that we have is that we cannot operate using high surface area catalysts like the ones based on carbon, because the anode of the electrolyzer operates at a high potential, and then these carbon materials will undergo too fast corrosion. On the other hand, the typical catalysts used are transition metal oxides that have low surface area. So knowing that the nickel iron oxide hydroxide are the best and most active catalysts for oxygen evolution reaction in alkaline media, we wanted to find a way to increase their surface area to improve their activity. So I developed this method based on aerogel synthesis method, synthesis, which consists in creating a gel, nickel iron oxide gel, and then drying it in supercritical conditions to keep the gel-like morphology and obtaining this very high surface area oxide with surface area above 400 square meters per gram. When testing it in a liquid electrolyte cell, we found out that the activity of a lot of these materials is way higher compared to the benchmark iridium oxide, which is the benchmark PGM catalyst for oxygen evolution reaction. So it was, we expect promising results for the testing in an operating electrolyzer. However, we faced with issues when fabricating electrodes with these PGM-free catalysts, because we found out that when they are exposed to deionized water, they tend to detach from the electrode. And so we proposed the addition of a binder in the electrode formulation in order to prevent this problem. When testing, we found out that changing the formulation of the ink in terms of binder content and ionomer content, the performance in DI water was varying a lot, which this didn't happen when testing with a supporting electrolyte solution like 0.1 molar potassium hydroxide. We also found out that the best performing electrode was also the one that underwent a more rapid degradation, because it was the one that contained the lower amount of binder. And so there is a price to pay, because if we put less binder, we have a higher detachment. And so we see more degradation. Finally, we move forward with testing our the catalyst that we developed, the nickel iron aerogel based one. After integrating in the electrode and testing it, we found out that when operating with 0.1 molar potassium hydroxide, the performance was actually pretty close to the one of a traditional proton exchange membrane electrolyzer, while when operating in DI water, the performance was still much lower, because of the challenges of operating in DI water, we cannot rely on the full surface of the catalyst for the reaction, but only on the interface between the catalyst and the ionomer. However, these were still encouraging results because we were able to operate at a high current density with a concentration of electrolyte way, way lower compared to what is used in a typical liquid alkaline electrolyzer. Finally, I would like to conclude by saying that continuing developing PGM-free catalysts with improved performance and better understanding their integration into electrodes and expanding these research approaches that I propose also to other catalysts for other electrochemical reactions, we will give a boost to a possible future in which the energy system will be based on hydrogen. Finally, I would like to conclude by acknowledging all the research institutions in which I carried out my work and my funding agency, in particular ElectroCat project with the United States Department of Energy Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, and also all my colleagues, mentors, and collaborators. Without them, all of these works would not have been possible. And I would like to thank all of you for your attention. I will be happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Luigi, for a great presentation. I would just remind everyone who's an attendee, you can post questions in the Q&A box and we will address them. Meanwhile, I will ask my other co-jury members if they have any questions to get us started for Luigi.
I guess I can start. Thanks, Luigi, for the really insightful presentation. I really appreciated your focus on both performance and reliability of these materials. I think it's important. Can you expand on any consideration? I don't know if it's part of your research, but if you have any ideas, any thoughts on the manufacturability of these materials? If you want to transition to hydrogen-based energy system, you want to have these electrolyzers available like large scale, large quantities. So is there any issue you anticipate by switching to other new materials?
No, I think that in terms of manufacturability of the catalyst, so here we can talk about two different aspects. So the first is just the synthesis of the catalyst, right? And then the integration into the electrode, so the fabrication of the membrane electrode assembly that then is the core of the fuel cell or the electrolyzer. Of course, there should be more work done into this field because these materials are still at the research scale, right? But substantially, I don't anticipate any issues with the scale-up. For the processability, I think that the way how we can prepare electrodes and MEAs will be similar to what is currently done for the benchmark PGM catalysts. So yeah, in this sense, I don't think that we will face many problems. Although the difference can be, for example, between the proton exchange membrane system, like water electrolyzers, in which usually the catalyst is deposited on the membrane and they use the Nafion membrane, which is very easy to handle and very easy to do, for example, a roll-to-roll process that is used in the industry. While for the newly developed anion exchange membranes, for the possible transition to anion exchange membrane electrolyzers, they are a little bit harder to handle. Their mechanical properties are still not comparable to the Nafion. So maybe we will have to use instead the approach of depositing the catalyst on the porous transport layer and then assembling the electrodes and the membrane without doing any hot pressing or things like that. But because of it's harder to handle the ionomer, the polymer that is used for this type of configuration compared to the Nafion is more well established and it has been used for decades. So that can be a challenge, but I don't see a challenge in the manufacturability of the catalyst.
Thank you. I'm going to interrupt you because we have not a lot of time. I think there's already a question from the audience. So maybe Alberto, we should take that one.
Yeah, so a question from the audience is, how about anion exchange membrane fuel cells? Is the main problem poor membrane and the presence of CO2 in air?
Yes, they suffer with this of these challenges. Yes, their main problem is that when they get the membrane, the ionomer gets carbonated if exposed to the CO2, present in the air. So it is challenging in that sense. In terms of catalysts, they can take advantage of the fact that the kinetics of the reaction, especially the oxygen reduction reaction at the cathode, it's way higher in alkaline media than in acid. So in that sense, we have an advantage, but we also have a drawback on the anode side because the hydrogen oxidation kinetics instead is slower in alkaline conditions. So we will have to pay more attention maybe in developing more efficient catalysts if you want to shift away from platinum group metal for alkaline fuel cells, for anion exchange membrane fuel cells.
Thank you, Luigi. I have actually a quick follow-up question on the question Emanuele asked you. So you mentioned that for the AM fuel cells, the mechanical properties of the membrane are an issue. Is that a fundamental problem, or it's really something that experience will get us there relatively quickly?
I think that, I'm not a polymer expert, so maybe I cannot answer these questions to the top, but I think that there are a lot of companies and research groups, startups that are also growing in this field. So the I would expect in the next few years to have big advancements in that sense. They are trying to improve the mechanical properties of these materials. And so probably we will see some more exciting results coming up in the next few years about their manufacturability. I think that they can get there. It's just a matter of maybe focusing more now that the hydrogen generation is becoming a hot topic. Maybe there will be more fast development about these materials. That's what I would expect.
Okay, thank you. We're actually coming to the end of our Q&A time. So thank you again, Luigi, for a great presentation. And
thank you.
Thanks. And we will move to our next finalist. Our next finalist is Professor Francesca Parisi, who was an assistant professor in electrical and computer engineering at Cornell University. And she will tell us about engineering sustainability via game theory and network design. The floor is yours, Francesca.
Perfect. So thank you so much for the introduction and for the invitation. Really, it's a pleasure to be here today. So again, what I'm going to talk about today is some of the results that we derive in my group about engineering sustainability, and in particular through the lenses of game theory and network design with a focus on smart cities. To kind of begin, well, we know that smart cities are characterized by unprecedented level of automation in which we have mobile sensing and digital technologies that are seamlessly integrated with physical infrastructure. And these promise to solve some of the biggest challenges of our time, like, for example, climate change or sustainability issues. And this is in particularly true if we think about the transportation sector within cities, with digital technologies such as personalized traffic information, on-demand services, and autonomous mobility. And also, if we think about the energy sector, especially with the integration of renewable generation, which is changing the power grid structure from a top-down to a distributed architecture. And of course, at the intersection of the two, we have electric mobility, which also offers great promises for the future. Now, one point that I want to make, however, is that the success of these technologies really requires the development of novel modeling and control paradigms to enable their efficient, reliable, and safe operation. And this is really the area of research where I focus in my group, which really tries to propose mathematical modeling to understand how these smart cities operate and how can we make them more efficient. And really the challenge in that is that these are complex systems, so we need a number of tools spanning from different disciplines that come from network theory to kind of model the underlying physical infrastructure, control, machine learning, and optimization if we want to understand how to make the system more efficient. But then what I'm going to try to argue in this presentation is that we should not forget that the main component of a smart cities are the people that live within this city. And so really we should also think about how to model human behavior and how these people interact with underlying technology. And I want to argue that the way to do that is through the lens of game theory. So what game theory is really a science that allows us to understand how people make strategic decisions. And so to give you a little bit of a primer, suppose you have a population where you have a certain number of agents, and each one of these agents need to make a decision, which is what I'm here denoting by xi. So this is going to be kind of the decision of agent I in my population. And when I say that agents are strategic, what do I mean is that their objective here is to make sure to make the best decision to maximize their interest, which means that they want to, for example, minimize a cost function that depends on their decision xi. Now, what makes this a game instead of a standard optimization problem is the fact that this cost function actually is going to depend also on decision of other agents, because these are all interconnecting and interacting with each other. And so here you see you have a very complex landscape where every agent is trying to optimize, but at the same time is coupled with others. And so it's not totally clear what is going to be the outcome of these complex interactions. And so really game theory kind of offers a solution to that in the concept of Nash equilibrium, which was actually introduced by John Nash, who won a Nobel Prize for that. And if you don't know about his life and story, you can watch the movie A Beautiful Mind, which was about his life. And really, I would say the contribution is this concept of equilibrium, which allow us to kind of understand what is going to be the outcome of this strategic interaction as a set of strategy, this x bar I, where no agent has any interest in unilateral deviation. So really in simple words, it's saying that a configuration of decision can be stable only if every agent is happy, so it's minimizing its cost function, given what other people are doing. And I want to underline that this is a fundamentally different solution concept than asking an external entity to actually solve this centralized problem of just minimizing the sum of the cost function of all the agents. Right? This is totally different because here we're only thinking about the sum of all the cost function, and we're not making sure that every agent is actually optimizing its own interest. And so to kind of understand and bring this back to smart cities and why is that important, I want to focus for a moment on application to traffic. And I kind of want to convince you that this is indeed a game. And why is that? Because, well, we have a population of agents that need to decide how to route themselves. And so the decision that they're going to make is, for example, which route to take for going from home to work. And of course, what they want to do is to minimize their travel time. But what I'm arguing is that this travel time actually depends on choices of other, because the congestion that you're going to experience on a road depends on the decision of the other agents. And so really we are in the realm of game theory, and we need to kind of model the outcome of this interaction with the concept of Nash equilibrium. And to kind of show you why this is important, let me quickly go through what is known as the brace paradox, which is a very simple example where we have, in this case, 4,000 cars that want to go from this origin here to this destination. And they actually have two possible ways to do that. So they can go through this top route or to this bottom route. And the number that you see here is the travel time on each one of these edges. So this would be 45 minutes for these two edges. And this is proportional to the number of cars that I have in the road because of congestion. So X here is the number of cars that I have in the road. Now, if you want to think, okay, what is the equilibrium in this setting? This is very simple. For symmetry reason, you can convince yourself that the solution is going to be that my population splits, half go on the top, half go on the bottom, and that makes the cost of the two roads exactly the same. So that would give me 65 minutes of total travel time. And this is the equilibrium of this game. So what is the paradox of that? Well, suppose that I have a brilliant engineer that comes and says, this 65 minutes is too long, I want to improve condition. And so what he decides to do is to bring a new road, which connects these two intersections actually with zero travel time. So this is an amazing fast road. And now you see that agents are not happy anymore in this new configuration because they are taking 65 minutes. But in fact, if they were to take this new route that I created, they would take 40 minutes. So what they decide to do is to switch this new route. And if you work out the math, you can figure out that all the agents actually would want to do that. So we will go to a new configuration where the only equilibrium is something where all my agents are going through this route. But now remember, the cost of this road depends on traffic congestion. So if now all the population goes there, the cost of this is going to double. And so overall, each agent takes 80 minutes. So this is why this is a paradox, right? Because we built a new road, but in fact, we made things worse. And note that because agents are strategic, there's no way to recover the previous solution, because if an agent now wants to switch back to this upper route, it's going to take 85 minutes, which is worse than 80. So they are all going to be stuck in this suboptimal solution. So this is kind of an example of when having strategic agents produces some inefficiencies in how the congestion level is distributed. And of course, you may say this is a very simple mathematical example. Does this has any information of what happens in reality? And in fact, people have observed this type of phenomena in many cities throughout the world. So this is really something of concern. And so this is something that we've been focusing on in my group. How do we kind of reconcile this strategic behavior and try to bring the system back to its optimal performance? And again, since the problem here is how agents make decisions, the solution may be to try to give them some incentives to try to coordinate to better outcomes. And of course, one classic way to do that is to give economic incentives. So for example, introduce some tolls such that agents will be de-incentivized of using some road, and that will bring us back closer to the global optimal solution. But kind of in the context of smart cities, I want to bring out another possible solution, which really is related to the widespread application of routing apps. And these are an amazing tool, right? Because we can now communicate in real time with all our drivers and make suggestion of routing. And so this seems that should actually make things better. But in fact, people have observed similar informational paradoxes as the one we discussed before, whereby giving more information to people may actually, again, because of strategic behavior, make things worse. And so this is kind of an area that's really fascinating to me. So trying to understand how can we exploit this amazing functionality, this amazing technology that we have in a smart way to reduce congestion level. And so this is one example of a work we've done in this area. Of course, very simple model here. We just consider a two-road network where we have, again, an origin and a destination, and agents can choose between a road, the bottom road, whose travel time is completely known, and the upper road, which instead agents do not know the travel time. And so the only way in which they can discover that is either by taking the road or relying on information from an external app. And without going too much into detail, what we show is that there are interesting setting of parameters for which providing full information to the agents about the state of this unknown road is actually not beneficial. So it will lead to total travel time that is higher than providing no information at all. That would be the green line. And in fact, you can make things much better if you design the information that you're providing to your agent in a smart way with a sophisticated algorithm. So this would be kind of this optimal information provision. So again, this is a very simple example, but I think it shows that we do have these amazing new technologies, but in order to really fully exploit their benefits, we also need to think about strategic agents' behavior and how do we optimize the use of these technologies. Okay, so having said that, again, one thing that I want to stress is, of course, this type of technologies will allow us to reduce congestion levels, but that itself is not enough to reach sustainability goals. And in fact, really the only way to do that is to transit to electric mobility. So electric vehicles have been promoted as a possible solution to greenhouse gas emissions, due to transportation. And one thing that I want to mention, however, is that this comes with its own challenges, because large penetration of electric vehicles will have a significant impact on the grid. And so this is another area of research that we've been focusing on, which is trying to understand whether we can coordinate the charging requirement of this large fleet of electric vehicles. On the one hand, not to impose too much stress on the grid, and maybe at the same time to actually provide some ancillary services. And really the key insight of how this may be possible is the fact that EV charging is what is known as flexible demand, which means that typically, for example, people connect their vehicle when they come back from work, and they really only want it to be charged by the next morning, but they have some flexibility on when exactly this charging should happen. And so the idea is, can we exploit this flexibility in order to coordinate the charging needs? And so what you see here on the left, for example, is a typical profile of energy demand, which is higher in the late afternoon and then it's very low at night. So maybe if you don't want to impose too much stress on the grid, you may think, well, I would like my vehicles to be charged at this low peak in the night. And so how can you do that? Again, thinking that agents are strategic, well, you may use a demand response method, which makes the price of the electricity dependent on the energy demand. However, remember, we have a very large population of electric vehicles, so what may end up happening is something like that. So if we give a price that is proportional to this profile, we may synchronize all our vehicles to charge at this point in time, and this may create some peaks that are not desirable. And so really what is the problem here is that we should make the price of electricity not dependent on the non-PV energy demand, but really on the total energy demand. And now if you do that, you see we're back in a game theoretical setting because every agent needs to decide when to charge, but it will have, in order to minimize the total electricity price, but this will now depend on choice of others because that will change the total energy profile. And so in my work, we've been looking at this kind of charging game, and we show that, for example, the Nash equilibrium has this nice so-called valley filling profile, which is very desirable from the point of view of the grid. And we developed some iterative algorithms to kind of coordinate the charging requirements of the population to this Nash equilibrium. And then just to conclude, I have that this also, of course, also depends on how we produce the electricity. So this will depend on the introduction of renewable resources. So another project that we work on or trying to understand is how to overcome the challenge that renewable production is unpredictable. So this will depend on, for example, a fluctuation in solar or wind power, which can produce grid instability. And so one question that we try to understand is how to increase the robustness of the grid. And we try to use techniques from network design in order to kind of design a better grid to decrease the subject to this fluctuation due to renewable resources. And okay, so without going too much into detail, because I'm running out of time, I want to conclude by saying that what I presented here are some application of my work motivated in this area of sustainability within smart cities. Within my group, we also have a more theoretical side of it, where we really look at these games and try to understand general and fundamental properties, like, for example, convergence to equilibria, generalizing these things that I've discussed for electric vehicles to general games. And then another area that I find really fascinating, which is a subset of game theory, where agents are interacting as given by an underlying network of interaction. And we made really fundamental contribution in understanding what are properties of the equilibria as a function of the underlying network, and what happens or how can we get computational tractability when this network becomes really, really large. And this has more application in social and economic context. So with that, I want to thank, of course, all my collaborators for this work. You can see their names in this slide, and also all the audience for your kind attention. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Francesca, for an excellent presentation. Again, I want to remind everyone who's an attendee, you can post your questions in the Q&A box. And while we wait for questions to show up there, I will again ask my co-jury members if they want to kick off the Q&A session.
Alberto, yes, thank you. I have a question. So Francesca, thank you so much for a very clear, nice presentation with direct references to sustainability and applications. So my question is about the state of the art and comparison of your methodology with other approaches, specifically the solution of the optimization problem that you are setting up. So have you compared other methods and how do they fare with your own game theory-based approach?
Yeah, so yes, of course, we have done something with that. I would say like the answer depends on the specific application that you are considering with. So maybe like focusing on one of these, like the charging of electric vehicle, for example, there's of course a number of people that have looked at these type of approaches and in particular demand response methods. Some of these approaches are based on a more like optimization based, so just solving this as a centralized coordination problem. What we suggested here is that this kind of game theoretical aspect, because really you want to make sure that, for example, if you are an aggregator that's handling this charging, you want to make sure that you can actually guarantee to your customer that you are giving him the best possible price given what other agents are doing. So this is kind of like the game theoretical is a little bit maybe the new insight in that particular branch of literature. One thing that I should mention is, of course, we did the kind of more theoretical model. There's a number of groups that are actually applying these things, which I think is actually fascinating. I know that at Caltech, they have large pilot problems of charging of electric vehicles in these smart ways. And there's been a number of even startups that kind of are really suggesting or producing apps so that customer can use that. I know that BMW and Tesla also are implementing some smart charging protocols. From my understanding, and again, I'm more in the theory side, as of right now, what is suggested is given a price, which is fixed a priori by the utility company, they optimize the charging. What we are suggesting here is that maybe we should design the price that we are giving in a smart way such that when everybody is optimizing with respect to that price, we obtain some desirable service for the grid. So that would be kind of another level of optimization, not only given the price, what is the best thing for the single agent, but really should we design the price in such a way that if everybody acts strategically on it, we can give some guarantees of what happens for the grid. So I don't know, hopefully this answered a little bit your question.
Thank you, Francesca.
Yeah.
I actually had a question on the first part of your presentation when you showed that there is a difference between giving the agents no information at all, full information, and you said a smart amount of information. Can you elaborate a little bit of where is the smarts in that algorithm?
Yeah, so in that particular example, like the very simple 2 rows, they're really like, let me see whether I can try to go back. Really what was smart about that is how many people should I give the information, right? Suppose I have a certain population of agents. Really the difference there was, should I give this information about the condition of the road to all my population? That would be what is here, like the full information. Should I give nobody information? That would be the private. And the optimal instead, should I design the number of people to which I give this information in a smart way, given the constraint of the problem? And you can see that in that case, you do have some reduction of total travel time. Yeah, and again, this is a very simple example for a 2-road network. The question of how to do this for a general network is still wide open. I think the state of the art is like simple networks for now. But I think like what I like of this, it shows some promises, right? It highlights a problem and some potential solutions so that hopefully people will think about this and really focus on what is the importance of this strategic behavior in this type of settings and really try to fully exploit the potential of these apps.
And as a follow-up, is there a way to introduce some form of, I guess I would call it either robustness or security in the algorithm, meaning that you may have found an optimal solution, but a malevolent agent could very easily completely destroy your optimal solution? Is that something you can introduce in these algorithms?
Yeah, you can do that. Of course, that's a big concern, both in these type of algorithms and also like, for example, EV charging case, people have looked at that because that will, like, I haven't gone into detail of that, but that will require some iterative communication. And then you may think, okay, if I know when a person is charging his vehicle, I may infer something about when he's at home and when he's not, and that has some potentially harmful consequences. So people have looked at how to make these maybe more private, introducing kind of differential privacy type of updates. So you introduce a little bit of noise in the signal that every agent is sending to make sure that by this signal that I'm seeing, I cannot really infer properties of the agent. But I have to say this is still a very also wide open area of research. And especially the other thing that you mentioned about agents that do not behave strategically, but really behave in order to be harmful. That's another concern that one should think about, of course.
So if you have time, can I follow up on that? I mean, you really touched on a very good point, which is agents that have like some malicious intent. But what about agents, users that have resistance to adopt any indication, like people that just resist to, for example, charge when they optimize? When is that right? Is it like price the only kind of knob you have, or you have other tools in that case?
Up to now, yes, and participation in this program is totally voluntary. So I guess there is some assumption that if you sign up for the program, you are willing to participate into it. So I think the way I see this moving forward is that we will have to model that, right? We will have to kind of get a sense from data about how many people can I expect participating in this program and model that through this strategic behavior. And then people that are not participating in the program will actually be kind of a non-flexible energy demand. So, right, even though they are EV charging, I will just model them as this baseline non-flexible demand because they do what they want. And of course, there are big challenges in that, in trying to model that and kind of predict for the next day what is going to be this profile on non-flexible energy demand. Of course, that's also a very interesting and important challenge. But I think, yeah, you can kind of, in some sense, it doesn't need to be all the electric vehicles. It needs to be the electric vehicles that you know are participating into the program for which you design these things.
Thank you.
I have one last question, sorry. Maybe I'm completely off base with scaling in units, but do you also consider the energetic cost of these algorithms? And since we're talking about sustainability, if you had an algorithm that is incredibly heavy, then maybe you might prefer something that's a little bit lighter.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. We haven't, to be honest. I've never touched upon that. We did try to optimize this algorithm in order to be very fast and efficient. So they do are all distributed algorithm so that, you know, we are trying to make this as efficient as possible. But yes, of course, they will have some computational complexities that if you really want to close the loop, you should also include that. My sense is that you would still get an improvement, even considering that, just because these are not very heavy programs to run. It's kind of some gradient descent. But yeah, that's a very fair point to make.
Thank you, Francesca. We have to move on to our third finalist. Our third finalist is Professor Bartolomeo Stellato, who is a professor in operations research and financial engineering at Princeton University. And he will talk to us about real-time decision-making and for clean and resilient energy systems. Bartolomeo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you for having me here. This is a great honor to be selected as one of the finalists of this award. So last year, the Texas power grid ended up making the headline of all major newspapers because it's almost collapsed due to a winter storm. And this caused several issues, including statewide power outages, food and water shortages, property damages of about $200 billion, and several deaths. And you can see on the right the image of the power grid before and after the storm. And this is just a glimpse of what our grids will have to endure in the next years due to climate change. So to make our grids more reliable, they must be resilient and they're facing unexpected challenges from, I would say in this talk, I will focus on two groups. One is related to the green energy transition, because we have way more diverse and different energy sources that are fed into the system, and also different kind of uses such that plug-in electric vehicles. And on the other hand, we have lots of uncertainty entering in the grid, for which the grid was not originally designed for. So in my research, I tried to use optimization to solve societal problems. And today we'd like to talk about how we can use optimization to make our grid more resilient. So in my research, I focus specifically on real-time optimization, which is the kind of optimization you apply when you want to solve decision-making problems over time, where you solve at every time step an optimization problem that is where you try to minimize a certain function of energy consumptions and cost, and you have constraints related to the dynamics and the physical limitations of your system. And the key of being able to be resilient, the key to resilience is the fact that real-time optimization allows us to adaptively replan and readjust our decisions in face of unexpected events. And that's where it's gaining lots of popularity between intelligence systems and also smart grid operations. So in my group, we work on decision-making tools that are based on data at the intersection of optimization, especially real-time optimization, machine learning, and optimal control. We have several applications related to societal challenges, real-world applications, but in this talk, I will focus primarily on sustainable energy applications that I've been working on in the last few years with collaborators and my students. So going back to the issues of the grid, these challenges that we're facing in the grid are related to things that optimization can address. On the one hand, in my research, I try to build fast and efficient optimization algorithms in order to solve important problems in real time. And on the other hand, I also build decision-making tools that are robust to uncertainty and that are based on data. So let's first focus on fast optimization algorithms. And the application I'd like to mention is related to medium voltage drives, and it's in collaboration with ABB, which is the leading global supplier of medium voltage drives until 100 megawatts. Medium voltage drives are composed of, they are linked to several important industries, and they're within all major industrial applications that you can imagine. For example, compressor pumps for water and wastewater treatment facilities, or even fans in power stations, they're operated with medium voltage drives. And they're connected to they're an important component connected to the grid that is usually operated after the high voltage AC currents are rectified. And then the electric drive works by converting the DC currents into alternating currents again that are fed into a motor. So this process has two conflicting objectives. On the one hand, we want to make the distortions as small as possible because they're responsible to the energy waste in this connection between the grid and the motor. And on the other hand, we would like to avoid operating the switches inside this inverter too often because they can heavily reduce the lifespan of the components, including the motor. And this is a combinatorial problem because the positions of the switches are integral. And not only it's combinatorial, but it needs to be solved every 25 microseconds, which is about 40,000 times a second. Traditional approaches, they give up on optimization because it's almost unthinkable to imagine to be able to solve these problems, but we really wanted to use optimization and optimal control to be able to apply the best trade-off between these two conflicting objectives. And the problem that we ended up solving was an approximation of this problem where we minimize a discounted objective over time, that represents a trade-off between the current distortions and the switching frequencies. And the rest of the problem is relatively simple because you have linear dynamics, an initial state and some state constraints that are easy, but the hard part are these switch positions that need to take integer values. So this is a mixed integer optimization problem that takes minutes or hours to solve, and we need to solve it in 25 microseconds. So what we did is first, we heavily reduced the the planning cost by computing offline in a smart way the approximate value function of this problem. And then we applied the planning to a very short horizon, but exploiting this value function that represents what happens in the future. This operation, combined to a massively parallel FPGA implementation, allowed us to solve problems within this target 25 microseconds and heavily reduce the computation time compared to commercial state-of-the-art mixed integer optimization solvers. And thanks to this value function that we compute offline, we were able also to reduce, for example, in this plot I showed for the same switching frequency and different horizon length, we were able to heavily reduce the total harmonic distortion, which is strictly related to the power losses in the medium voltage drive. And this allows us to obtain higher energy efficiency and also operate at lower switching frequencies, so to increase the lifespan of the components and the electric motor. So in this talk, I'd like also to talk about another application related to fast optimization algorithms and how they can really improve the way we make decisions related to sustainable energy. And this is related to quadratic programming. So quadratic optimization is a very old problem. It's the problem of minimizing a convex quadratic function subject to linear constraints that are described as a polyhedron, like the one colored in the slide. And even though it's an old problem, it has been applied in numerous applications in space, aerospace engineering, in autonomous rocket landing, signal processing, and also it's within several algorithms used in the grid. And more importantly, is a core optimization problem that we need to solve in real-time optimization and optimal control, especially predictive control of intelligent systems. So if we're able to solve this a bit better than what's currently done, we can have a huge impact. So our recipe to do that was to apply a known algorithm called ADMM, an operator splitting methods, that in a nutshell looks like this, where the bottleneck is a linear system solution that, however, has a very nice structure for which it is always solvable, because this matrix, it's by construction full rank. So these components, sigma and rho, they make it well structured. And all the other steps in an algorithm are easy operations. They're just a simple projection onto a box or vector additions and subtractions. So the algorithm in SQP solver ended up being very efficient because it's, first of all, this matrix, we can pre-compute its factorization before, and the algorithms, because it doesn't depend on the iterates, so we can amortize that cost. And not only that, but in sequential decision making, when only some of the components of the problem, like the Q, L, and U in the problem above, if only those change, also that matrix doesn't change either. So we can pre-compute and amortize the computation cost online, especially in sequential decision making. This algorithm was also very robust because this linear system is always solvable, so we don't face any issues even if the problem data is corrupted, which happens a lot in real-time optimization and control. And also it's modular. It's so simple that it can be implemented either on microcontrollers, large-scale multi-core CPUs with Intel MKL, or even GPU architectures. So we implemented an open source version of the solver that now received a lot of attention both in academia and industry, and it achieved about 28 million downloads to date, only from the Python language. We don't know, it's open source, so everybody could use it without having to tell us. But between these applications, I would like to show you a few of the important energy-related ones, which are optimal trajectory generation for autonomous vehicles. So Lyft Level 5 and Baidu Apollo are two of the largest companies that are working on autonomous driving, and they're using SQP to optimize the trajectory generation of these vehicles. So in terms of energy consumption and also safety, Exist is the largest energy market in Turkey that is working on renewable energy exchanges, and it's using SQP to operate, to market these operations and make renewable energy investments safer. Another application I'm very excited about is Optimal, which is a startup in the Netherlands that is working on the first carbon negative greenhouses, which will remove carbon from the atmosphere. They're totally operated by renewable energy and will be a sustainable way to increase and make the production of the vegetables we bring to our tables more sustainable in the future. Also, in terms of smart grid operations, this startup Gridmatic in the Bay Area is working on decarbonizing the energy grid by operating grid-scale batteries as components of at least 50 megawatts in the grid, and they're using OSQP to operate these batteries. And even the Argonne National Laboratory is solving these complicated problems necessary to operate the grid, the robust security constraint optimal power flow problems, where they use OSQP as a subcomponent of these algorithms on GPUs. So these are only a few of the applications that we're also that we have been interacting with and working with, but there's many more that I believe are still we still need to discover. So another part that I would like to focus now is how to make decisions under uncertainty and how this can affect our grid, or how decisions are related to sustainable energy. So the problem that I would like to focus on, just as a working example, is the problem of placing electric charging stations in a grid. So the problem also referred to as facility location problem, where we want to decide balance a trade-off between the cost of opening charging stations and the cost of distributing energy to the users, which could be either the energy distributed from the charging station to the users or the energy by the users that they need supply to get to the charging station. This is a problem in a simplified version looks like this, where we have some capacity constraints. Ri is the capacity of each charging station. And these constraints are affected by uncertainty, because this vector U is a vector of uncertain demands that are applied to this charging station that we don't know a priori. So satisfying this constraint is very hard. And there's a lot of literature done to solve problems that look like this with this kind of constraints. And there's two conflicting approaches. One is a worst case approach that is related to robust optimization that is very tractable, but is conservative. We immunize against all the worst case value of the uncertainty in a set. On the other end of the spectrum, we have a probabilistic approach where we assume to know a family of distributions where the uncertainty lives. This is less conservative because we look at the distributions, but is intractable. So in our work, we introduce mean robust optimization, which is a data-driven approach that lies in between, that is based on clustering the data points into different centroids and building hyperspheres around these centroids as our uncertainty set. So by varying the number of clusters, we were able to really change the way we go from robust optimization and distributionally robust optimization. And we were able to highly reduce the dimensionality of the problem and provide the same constraint satisfaction guarantees as the probabilistic approach, under some assumptions, including that in some cases are related just to linearity of the constraints, which are very popular. And this is with my amazing student, Irina Wang, and my undergraduate students, Cole Becker, and collaborator, Barbara Paris. So going back to this example, what happened if we apply our method to this facility location problem, we were able to dramatically reduce the dimensionality of the problem by varying the number of clusters on the x-axis and obtaining several orders of magnitude speedups, and also guaranteeing exactly the same, obtaining the same guarantees of constraint satisfaction. This is a proof of concept, but problems with constraints of this sort are extremely popular in optimal power flow and unit commitment problems that are very important for the grid. And I believe that this approach will really make a difference in how we solve optimization problems under uncertainty in the future. Lastly, I would like to briefly mention a new project I'm very excited about. We won this grant inside university in the Metropolis Initiative for Smart Cities. This project focused on making cities more sustainable, resilient, and equitable. And I won this project with this internal grant with my collaborator, Jaime Fisac from electrical engineering. And we just hired an Italian postdoc from Andrea Lodi's group, Gabriele Dragotto, and we're working on multi-agent systems on networks, where we divide this project into parts, where we first want to learn the models that represent the rationality of the agents by assuming that they solve optimization problems. And then we want to design intervention based on those in order to derive or guide our networks in order to be safer in terms of transportation, or cleaner in terms of energy. And we're also looking into including integer variables because Gabriele Dragotto, we hired an expert in integer programming games, which will really make a difference in the future. So to conclude, sustainable energy is possible, and data and optimization are becoming much more intertwined compared to before, and they're allowing us to really achieve a cleaner grid and more resilient grid by developing systems that are more adaptive, using real-time optimization and adjusting our plans in real time, and safer by applying robust decision-making from data with reliable constraint satisfaction guarantees. Thank you very much for your attention. I'd be happy to answer any question.
Thank you, Bartolomeo, for a great presentation. Remember, you can put your questions in the Q&A box if you're in the audience, if you're one of the attendees. And while we wait for that, I will ask my co-jury members if they have any questions for Bartolomeo.
Alberto, I have a couple of quick questions. So Bartolomeo, thanks for the very clear, very nice presentation. I really enjoyed it. I have two quick questions. One regarding the state of the art, and if you have compared, as I expect, your algorithm with ACOS, for example, which is a popular embedded solver. And the second question that might be connected to it is how you deal with nonlinear dynamics. So yeah, the dynamics I've seen in your examples are very simple, but problems are instead nonlinear. So how do you approach that?
Thank you. Let me reshare. For some reason it closed. I wanted to focus on the slide. 1 second. Okay. So so to answer the first question, in the paper we have several comparisons, both on randomly generated problems with realistic assumptions from different application areas and state-of-the-art benchmarks for different solvers. We compare with ECOS for quadratic programs. ECOS solves more general problems like second-order cone programs. So and it's an interior point method, so it has different properties. It doesn't exploit warm start in the same way as OSQP. And I would say in terms of ECOS, we were able to significantly improve the performance based on that, but we're solving a more restricted class of problems. Based on, we also compare with Gurobi and Mosaic, which are commercial solvers, and we were able to achieve comparable performance with Gurobi on these problems. Gurobi was slightly better in the very badly scaled problems for the data sets that are state-of-the-art optimization data sets for operations research. The other, and we have having all these users is actually a very good way to get tricky problems that we want to solve. So actually, it's really becoming a very good way to improve this method. And thankfully, Princeton, I applied for the support of a software engineer who's helping a transition to, for example, include OSQP as with differentiable optimization models, and also compare with state-of-the-art there, and also provide different benchmarks with different linear algebra architectures. So I would say it's a work in progress, but we have already many comparisons in the paper. In terms of the other question regarding the nonlinear dynamics, so OSQP is applied, for example, for trajectory generation, for online trajectory generation is applied most of the times inside sequential quadratic programming problems. So where you, at every iteration, you solve a quadratic program, which is an approximation of the nonlinear problem that you have originally to solve. So this is what in autonomous vehicle they're solving, and also in the startup optimal for carbon negative greenhouses. And in terms of the other problem with integer variables, the one with the medium voltage drives, this could be seen as a piecewise affine linear dynamic. So in many cases, a completely different approach, I guess, in the community is to approximate the dynamics not as nonlinear, but as piecewise linear by introducing integer variables. So in that case, the modeling as a piecewise linear problem worked very well, but it really depends on the application. OSQP, by default, it works with linear constraints, but there's many ways to embed it, in which it was embedded inside different algorithms that deal with nonlinearities.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
So can I it's a little bit of a follow-up, a little bit like broadening what we've been discussing so far. I'm curious
Yes.
how you see the next step, or actually the most challenging next step of your research. Is it like more use cases? Is it like increasing the frequency of your algorithm? Is it putting more constraints and considering more variables? I mean, yeah, how do you see your research moving forward?
So moving forward, I would say there's two parts. I'm still working a lot in developing more reliable first order methods like this one and certifying it for real-time application, especially when you care about safety. So to absolutely certify that you do converge for safety critical applications. In terms of data-driven problems like this approach that I presented, I would like to extend this to other problems in uncertain decision making, like dynamic optimization or optimization where you have uncertainty, but in a dynamic setting. And in terms of applications to sustainable systems, there's plenty of them that we would like to focus on and apply this method to, because, for example, we're aware of lots of collaborators in the integer programming community that work on optimal power flow approximations. They solve decision-making problem under uncertainty, but they get gigantic problems because they get one constraint per data sample. So our clustering method would really help in the future in reducing the dimensionality, making some problems that are today considered unsolvable actually solvable. And in terms of smart grid, this work on with my two collaborators, we just started. Gabriele started with us in September, and I also have a new student, Stefan Clark, who started working on these topics in September on combining learning and multi-agent decision models in order to build data-driven systems to optimize and improve the behaviors in our grids. So these are some of the topics.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bartolomeo. Actually, I had a quick question. On your slide 9, where you showed the harmonic distortion reduction with your algorithm.
Yes, let me pull it back. This one. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess it's a if I look at the number on the y-axis, is a pretty small percentage, and it's a reduction, but it's not huge. Can you give me an idea of what the impact of those small numbers has?
That's a good question. I would say the answer in terms of impact really depends on the model that we're using. Because this medium voltage drive can go from I would say hundreds of kilowatts to 100 megawatts. So it really depends on these models. I could tell you though that most of the papers in the power electronics community working on this topic, they are working towards shaving off a much smaller percentage based on that, because the community doesn't really is focused on one-step prediction in the future. So in some sense, looking at more steps in the future is still something that they're not really aware of, while it's a very common thing in other applications of optimal control. So I would say it's hard to give you an exact number because it really depends on the model. This was on a simulation of a model that ABB gave us. But in terms of comparing to state of the art or seeing where people are fighting to get improvements, they're much smaller usually. Something between when you have horizon length of 10, there the last step is usually you get 0.2% improvements or something like this as a normal improvement. So that's why it received a significant number of attentions or I would say comments or citations based on the fact that we were able to improve much more than what was considered before doable. That's thanks to optimization, I would say.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Thanks. That's exactly the that's an answer to my question. Okay, well, this brings us to the end of our presentation part of this symposium. I want to thank again, first of all, the members of the jury. They know how hard it was to select these 3 finalists, and also the 3 finalists for making our job even harder to select the winner with really very clear and excellent presentations. Before we part, we are honored to have Professor Franco Strazzabosco here among us. He's the main sponsor of the prize, and I will give him the floor for a few words.
Thank you very much. I won't make you waiting too much, just to thank the presenter for their outstanding job. Thank ISSNAF for hosting for the 10th year in a row. I think this hour in the memory of my late father, and also what I heard today. It's convinced me that the decision we made with the ISSNAF leadership to focus this prize on energy for sustainability was the right one, because you presented 3 outstanding projects, and I hope we had enough funding to award all of them. So also this is very much, akin to what my father did. He invested many years ago in methane, because at the time that was the clean energy after the war, and now it's all over in the news again. So again, thank you very much, and I wish you all luck for the hour, but mostly for your profession and continuing research. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Strazzabosco, for your support. And now I will give the floor to Dr. Zufada, who is the president of ISSNAF, for last words.
Thank you, Alberto. It has been a real pleasure to listen to the presenters, indeed exciting topics. That's really what we are about, right? And I also want to acknowledge Mario's support. The Strazzabosco Award is our second longest in existence, Young Investigator Award. So it's really thanks to the commitment of our sponsors, families, as well as the embassy or other organizations that we can keep this going. And it's clear that this is very valuable, and we are hoping to continue to do so and help the emerging researchers get their work visible and recognized. Thank you all for participating.
Thank you, Cinzia, and thanks to everyone. I guess this closes our symposium. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.